In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Slava Sister.
Slava Thee.
Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory be forever.
A kangaroo kept getting out of his enclosure at the zoo. And knowing that he could hop high, the zoo officials put up a 10-foot fence around his enclosure. But he was out the next morning, roaming around the zoo. And so a 20-foot fence was put up. Again, he got out. And when the fence was 40 feet high, a camel in the next enclosure asked the kangaroo, "How high do you think they'll go?" The kangaroo said, "Oh, probably about 1,000 feet, or until somebody finally locks my gate at night." No response from the crowd here, brothers and sisters. No response. Fences. Fences keep us in, right? And they keep others out. We were talking about the different fences in our neighborhood here in Sutherland, just even across the back way. And, there are wooden fences, and there are these fancy fences. Some people have even a stone or a brick fence. And they keep us in, they keep others out, but in a way, in a perhaps more profound way, we could consider a fence as like a dividing line from one way of life to another. Last week I talked with someone whose wife had a heart attack about a year ago. She survived and she's doing well. But the man spoke about the heart attack as a bit of a dividing line in their lives. There was life before the heart attack and life after the heart attack. And he said it changed how they are with one another, how they see their lives, and that they're reassessing what's really important to them. Well, that dividing line isn't so much a way of marking time or remembering an event. It's one of those threshold moments that calls into question everything in life. Our priorities, our values, the way we live and relate to one another, the things that truly matter, where we want to invest our time and energy, how we want to be in this world, what we want from life. Dividing lines are those moments when life gets really real. They hold before us questions about who we are, who we want to be, what we've done, and whether our life matters and makes a difference. And there is no one right answer to any of those questions. It's an ongoing process of getting clarity and working out our life. And I wonder if that's what's happening with Jesus in today's gospel. This gospel is part of what's known as the farewell discourse of John's gospel. In fact, our first reading, one could say that it was Paul's farewell discourse to the people, to the men of Ephesus. But in our gospel, it's the night of the Last Supper. Jesus has washed the feet of his disciples, and then he begins a long monologue about leaving and his impending death. He talks a lot and for a long time. In fact, in John's Gospel, 4 chapters and 117 verses worth of talking. He talks about what it all means and what it will be like for the disciples in the future. But the entire discourse also gives us some hints about what's going on within Jesus. So, for example, in chapter 13, the beginning of the discourse, we read that Jesus was troubled in spirit, declared that one of his friends would betray him. In chapter 14, Philip says to him, "Lord, show us the Father and we will be satisfied." And how does Jesus respond? He says, his response, "Have I been with you all this time, Philip, and you still do not know me?" That response might make us wonder if Jesus is questioning if he has accomplished anything with his disciples. And in chapter 15, Jesus acknowledges that the world hates him. And in chapter 16, he knows that he will be abandoned by his friends. And he says, "The hour is coming, indeed has come, when you will be scattered, each one to his home, and you will leave me alone." That's the context for Jesus' prayer in today's gospel. Jesus' prayer isn't a simple, "Dear God, please." It's a bit rambling and circuitous. It's confusing. It's hard to understand. It moves back and forth. It's as much about him as it is the disciples. He only asked 3 things of his Father: that God would protect the disciples so that they may be one as Jesus and the Father are one, that God would protect them from the evil one, and that God would sanctify them in the truth. The rest of the prayer is Jesus saying what God has done, what he has done, what the disciples have done, what the world has done. The rest of the prayer is Jesus working through internally what's happening. Haven't you had those kind of conversations? I have. They are those conversations in which we are thinking out loud, wrestling with life, making statements, asking questions. And the conversation goes in all sorts of directions. It circles back on itself, and sometimes it makes no sense. We often contradict ourselves. It's anything but linear and straightforward. We're listening to ourselves as we talk and trying to get clarity and come to terms with what's happening within us. Sometimes they are conversations with friends, other time there are prayers to God. So Jesus' prayer isn't so different from the way I prayed at times, and the way I suspect you also have prayed. It sounds to me like there's a thread of grief running through his prayer. It sounds to me like Jesus is trying to get some clarity and work out his life, what he has done and what is coming next. It sounds to me like Jesus has come to a dividing line in his life. And more often than not, we know dividing lines are places of prayer and pleading. We all come to those dividing lines in our lives. It might be a heart attack, the death of a loved one, a divorce, the loss of a job, an aging body, or a pandemic. But it might also be a graduation, a marriage, the birth of a child or grandchild, a retirement, an unexpected opportunity. In some way, our lives are a series of dividing lines. Every one of you could look back and see the dividing lines in your life, the questions that were raised, the choices you made, the struggles you faced, and the ways in which your life changed. Dividing lines frame the human condition and our struggle to be authentic and faithful and whole. And so in that sense, Jesus isn't as different from us as we often think or want him to be. Today, we see the human Jesus standing in solidarity with us and our humanity. Today, we see the human Jesus working out his life. And who among us doesn't know what that's like? We all do. We all struggle to work out our life, especially these days. So tell me this. What are you working out and struggling with today? What is the dividing line running through your life today? What are you doing with it? I can't tell you what to do with those dividing lines. I don't have your answers. But I'll tell you this. I'm struck by what Jesus doesn't do. He doesn't isolate or close in on himself. He doesn't get angry or resentful. He doesn't resist or fight back. He doesn't run away or try to escape. He doesn't complain about or deny the reality of what's happening. Instead, he faces his life. He's in touch with his humanity. He feels what he feels. He grieves. He gathers with his friends. He prays. He lives with a faith that resurrection hope is always on the other side of our dividing lines. So what about you and me? What will we do when we come to the next dividing line in our life? Or as we face the one we all face right now? What attitudes, choices, and behaviors will we bring to that dividing line? How will they help us across to the other side? And what if we took our cue from Jesus? What if we came to the dividing lines in our life, trusting our humanity and trusting that new life, the life of resurrection, is always on the other side? Slaviskt Christus.
Love